To date, even Americans themselves are on record saying that their democracy is not the perfect kind of democracy. They are also trying to improve on it. And this was challenged during the reign of Trump and the allegations that the Russians were able to infiltrate the American system. It was also challenged during Hillary Clinton's win against, a minority, a fraction of just a few people voting against the popular vote. And so it's not like anybody is saying the American system is the perfect one. And hence the reason why I think the Kenyan system is trying to accommodate a hybrid, pick some bits of Chinese, not entirely, pick some bits of US and balance it. And please note this. He's been giving example about how China handles issues of corruption. It's because the systems in China, the political systems, the structures are functional. It's not about the president. In fact, you're one saying it's the minister who actually took initiative because they understand the assignment. They understand that once you have a system that is functioning, that is bigger than the president, then you get everything right. And maybe that's something we can borrow from the Chinese because in our Kenyan context, we might have very strong political positions at the level of the president. He pronounces himself. But unless EACC stops looking at themselves as a toothless dog and begin to bite, that's when now people will begin to appreciate that we can actually fight corruption. So sometimes it's not a president's problem, it's a Kenyan collective problem. And that's why we must evolve in our thinking and stop looking at government of the day as an enemy because you never voted against it. Once a government is in office, the first thing you do is embrace and buy the vision of that government. And then now try locate yourself as a Kenyan and say, what is it that I can do? And that's the same attitude that shaped the US. Remember the likes of JF Kennedy asking Americans, don't keep asking what the government can do for you. It's about time you ask, what can you do for the government? And the approach of the Americans in their political language, they always ask themselves, what is it that we can do for our government more? That's why when the Americans travel to Kenya, they don't really question things like, how did the delegation fly? Because they believe that the delegation is responsible enough to come and harvest from us. But from our end, what concerns us is why would Ruto be flying on a private jet? Things that ideally are not the bigger picture. The bigger picture here should be the delegation that traveled, what are they coming back with? And to give you a last example, and it was a comical one, they said one of Congo's president had traveled with a delegation to, I think it was the US, similar state visit, accorded all these trappings. But now the unfortunate thing, the delegation that this president had traveled with comprised of people who were not even competent enough or qualified to actually attend to such a reception. So they ended up sitting there. By the time they're engaging their counterparts in the US, the president of the US had assembled the best brains, to negotiate. So this guy, when he was just doing his round of introduction, he was actually introducing Fanyamambo, Anthony, and just a few guys who probably have no significant role in government. So they ended up walking back to their country with nothing. Look at the Kenyan delegation that has traveled, We've picked from all the sectors of our spaces. We've picked from the opposition the best they had given, because Opiyo Wandayi is a respected opposition leader. And he was picked by the Azimio as their focal person in parliament. We've balanced him with Kimani Ichung'wah. We have the likes of Musalia Mudavadi, who's a seasoned politician, a seasoned diplomat, having been a vice president before. So he understands some of these things. And a host of other people, very brilliant brains, including Anne Waiguru, the COG chair. Very brilliant minds in Kenya. So I honestly expect, and I think that's where Kenyans should be right now, questioning the impact, the implication of first what the delegation went to do, because an assignment we've given them. That's why we allow them use our resources. So when they come back and they give us a report that paints a picture of what Fanyamambo aspires, that one, the Kenyan investment will go up in the sense that more Kenyans will start doing business with the Americans. And that is already happening. As we speak, I have been in a meeting where Americans are already asking themselves, how do we leverage on this visit? How do we leverage on this partnership? Look at the caliber of people who've gone. There's a component of the creatives. Eddie Butita, if you look at his history, he was at some point even dismissed as a nobody. But he's now been afforded an opportunity to interact at the level of
Okay.
Is it John Harvey?
Steve
Harvey, sorry.
Okay.
And they are interacting commercially.
And as we come to the end, towards the end of this discussion, because I want us to look at the local politics as well, there's one more question that has been asked by Kenyans, and probably the reason why some doubts have been raised. It's the influence of the U.S. ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman. She's become rather a focal point, very closely aligned with this administration, unlike very many other U.S. ambassadors to Kenya before her. And many people feel that probably she's adopted or assumed a bigger role, and probably this influence is what is translating into the state visit. There are concerns that probably she's becoming too powerful. Do you agree with that assessment, Bonalute?
Oh, well, I do agree that any ambassador that is sent to any country represent his or her country, does not represent herself. The power she wields is not her personal power, but it's a power that is gotten from the country where she represents. As I talk about her and her power and the relationship that she's got with this country, I would want to actually just say there is no country in the world, not even at individual level, that can continue, that can progress without loans. I totally agree with my friend Fanya Mambo on the basis of how we spend our resources, how we can buy a pen at 200 shillings. I do not subscribe to that. I actually, that amounts to corruption, and I think that is what we are asking the government to fight. But that does not by itself then tells us that we should not then borrow. We should not go out there and look for money to develop this country. If we look at that way, then we are trivializing the whole thing. That the fact that there is corruption in this country, we should not go out and look for money to develop this country. What we need to do is to kill corruption, not to bar ourselves from getting resources from outside. Globally, if you look at the 2023 global debts, it actually goes to 315 trillion US dollars. Every country in the world, including the UK, including China. China, for example, has got $12.5 trillion in debts. And that's one of the countries we are saying is a model country. The UK has got probably 3 trillion debts. So you find that if we continue saying that as a country, oh, let us not borrow, because if we borrow, we will not, I think we're going to kill this country. Mm-hmm. Even at individual level, I actually want to challenge Fanya Mambo. If you go to his account, we will find that whatever he has, and we appreciate the fact that he's developed himself. He's not developed himself out of nothing. He's developed himself out of getting money from a neighbor or from a bank. At least everybody has got a debt. The only thing that the Bible says that we need to be paying our debts. We need to be paying. Because if you take it and you don't pay, then that is where you actually come at crossroads with everybody, including with God. But you are allowed to borrow. Mm-hmm. So then I come back to the statements and the U.S. ambassador and their role. You can actually see the U.S. ambassador in the U.S. Probably being close to part of the delegation. She actually played a very key role in this. And to facilitate all the Kenyans that have traveled to the U.S., she actually played a role. For me, I'll say the fact that the U.S. ambassador is trying to work very closely with this administration is an affirmation that the U.S. government accepts the operations in Kenya. Because initially we've actually seen some of the U.S. ambassadors that have actually been expelled out of this country because they were at crossroads with the government. And they were at crossroads because their country, with their government, continually told them that the Kenyan government then was not democratic enough, was probably corrupt, was not responsive, was not receptive. And so all these things made their relationship very sour to levels where the ambassadors were expelled. So by the time that you see an ambassador of a country being very cordial and very cozy with the country, it basically means that those countries are resonating together, and which is very good for us because
but does it US
is a big country. If we resonate with the US, if we actually start cooperating with the US, we start working closely with them, I tell you, this country will go forward.
Fanyamambo, are you concerned that probably this ambassador could be wielding too much influence that could be problematic for Kenya?
You see, this is the diplomat here, and they'll tell you from my understanding of international law, because I can only speak from my understanding of international law, diplomats are allowed to do in the country what the government allows. I mean, our country has got the power to declare them persona non grata if at some point they felt that they have overstepped their mandate. I do not see, for me, I always look at this country from the lens of Mwananchi. And because what she's doing has not directly affected Mwananchi in a negative way, then she's at liberty to continue doing what she's doing. If she was saying things or doing things that we feel affect Mwananchi so negatively, and they have a direct impact on the life of Mwananchi, that's fine. But at that upper level there, what they are doing, it's fine. Let them enjoy themselves. I think as a country, for us is what affects the bulk of the Mwananchi. From where we sit, we don't see anything that is a threat to the lives of the direct Mwananchi. And they haven't come up with a law or policy or declaration that we feel is affecting the people who we stand for and fight for every other day.
Yet the argument has always been that all this, the Bretton Woods institutions that we're talking about, that probably some of the issues that Kenya is suffering, the higher taxation, is coming directly from the US through the Bretton Woods institutions. It's a kind of influence we see in a face like Meg Whitman, that we see that closeness and we know that that's a connection to the IMF, that's a connection to the World Bank. And if at all, whatever we are feeling as Kenyans is a direct result of that relationship, should we be concerned that about any close relationship that, like the one we're seeing?
I think first is just to appreciate who Meg Whitman is. I mean, this is her first ever posting as a diplomat. Her background has very little to do with this level of engagement. I mean, from the US, I think she contested for, was it New York or California governorship, which she lost. And then as a political reward, she was seconded to Kenya as her first ever posting. So you need to understand Meg Whitman from a business lady perspective, because I think she's the former CEO of eBay and all that. So I think one of the reasons why probably she's occupied most of the spaces is because, excuse me, she has business deals that probably could be making sense. One of the reasons why we are talking so big about content creation and the creatives sector is because you can actually see that's her background. And give it to her, she's really been able to push it into the Kenyan space such that we are talking about it at the next level. And I mean, that's where the world is heading to. The next frontier in terms of economic opportunities are around issues of technology. But over and beyond that, I think Meg is not also the first ambassador to have attempted to manifest influence. Remember Michael Ranabag? You know, he was rubbing government the wrong way.
Most of them have been at loggerheads with the government.
And I think probably is the brief the Americans get when they come, because if you look at it from an international perspective, the Americans' consistency in trying to project themselves as the global hegemony has to always be manifested. And it's upon us to either rebel it diplomatically or find a way of managing that. And I feel like the government is doing quite well so far, because if us accommodating her can give us this kind of reception, then I think we're also getting it right. Because, again, it comes back to the question of the principle of mutuality. Okay. What is in it for Kenyans? And I think the rules of diplomacy, one of the fundamental ones, is the concept of non-interference. As long as you're not perceived to directly influence either the outcome of an election or the running of a country's affair, then you're good to go. The rest is just how you do your negotiations. Because diplomacy, again, is about how you negotiate. So if my skills include maybe my oratory power, my strategies, then you cannot blame the American ambassador. It has to come back to Kenya, because she's responding to our foreign policy strategy, but with an American thinking. Okay. So we either have to, if we feel like she's too powerful, we have to come back and ask ourselves, what is it that you're not doing right?
Do you feel she's too powerful?
She is very, very powerful.
Are you concerned that that could be a problem for Kenya?
Yeah, if it's left unwatched, again, sometimes when you give a foreigner too much leeway, sometimes there's a tendency to exploit. Remember, countries are interest-driven. You know, the Americans have interest in Kenya. Part of her assignment is to make sure that she pushes the interest of the American business people. You can be sure her being in the US with President Ruto is not necessarily in the interest of Kenya. She's not there to cover for our interest. She's there to look out for the American interest. But so does the Kenyan system. We have to make sure, and that's why I brought in the question of the caliber of the Kenyan delegation that has visited. Because you see, once you're given a brief, how do you deal with that brief? And that's why I really love what President Ruto is doing. The consistency in his messaging is a powerful tool in diplomacy. Okay. Because the moment you keep repeating that we are looking for collaboration, we are looking for partnership, we are looking for cooperation, we are not looking for handouts. Mm-hmm. We are not coming here to project ourselves as a poor country, as Fanyamambo was trying to portray. We are an opportunity. We are Africa's hegemony of some sort. You know, you have to project
Interesting that we place ourselves at that position of being a hegemon in Africa. But anyway, I want us to, because of time, to switch a bit and come back home and look at what is happening locally, especially with the politics, in relation to what is happening in the US. And even as the president has been away, we've been entertained to some very different kind of headlines back home. And I'm sure even the president, probably every morning he wakes up in the US and is given a copy of the Daily Nation or the Standard to look at the front page. He may be wondering what exactly is happening back home. The image of the deputy president has consistently been on the front pages. And this debate about resource allocation, 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, the divisions within UDA, the mamas within Mount Kenya politics, that is what is making headlines locally. And I want us to focus on that briefly. On the front page of the Daily Nation, the top strip, you talk about why Gachagua is quoting Uhuru. And why this could be happening is interesting. On the other dailies, and this is the People Daily, they say the reasons behind Ruto-Gachagua war. That's a big headline there. On Taifa Leo, Gachagua alilia Uhuru. On the Star, how Mount Kenya political wave will hit Ruto and Raila. These are the main headlines on the front pages. I think it's only the Standard that has not, that doesn't have a big story about Gachagua, but it's still a mention. Hustler defenders have turned into Gachagua's critics. Lotte, even within the UDA formation that is carrying out grassroots elections, this kind of division is going to cause problems. I know your position about the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote debate on this matter. You've made it very clear. But whatever we are seeing talks about a bigger problem within the ruling formation.
Well, thank you. The last time I was in this studio, I actually doubted if Gachagua represented every Kenyan as the deputy president. Because when the BBI was being made, he was vehemently rejecting the idea of 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. He did that all this through until when he became the deputy president, and everything was very good for him until when he actually now realized that the young thugs within Mount Kenya are against him and are actually going for his seat. That is the time he realizes that he was losing Mount Kenya, and the only thing that he could say, probably not even believing in what we're saying, is that he wants to now go for the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, which has been rejected by many Kenyans. Because the Constitution does not talk in any form about the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. Because what guides this country is the Constitution, and that was written by all Kenyans. And so for me, I think what Mr. Gachagua, the deputy president, was saying, he was trying to appeal to Mount Kenya to love him. And then after which he went for prayers, he went for fasting, he went for supplication and all those that he said. And then after which he come out and now start to send an olive branch to the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, to say that we need to forgive each other. First of all, when I looked at the term forgiving each other, when I'm forgiving you, it basically means I've done something against you. Mm-hmm. And so when you're forgiving me, it basically means you've done something against me. So if I say that let's forgive each other, it also basically means that he is aware that he's done wrong to the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta. And we saw that even during the time they were taking over power. Mm-hmm. He was very zealous to talk very negatively about Uhuru Kenyatta. Now he realizes that in politics, everybody is a friend and everybody is an enemy depending on where you're standing. So for now, he actually wants the former president to be his friend. Sometimes back, he wanted that guy to be his enemy. Mm-hmm. And so I think he's learning a political lesson. 2, it is also important for us to realize that politics is very dynamic. And the position of being a deputy president the position of being a deputy governor or a deputy principal, as well as have a jinx. And I like the way some assessments have actually done it, that the jinx of a deputy president since the time of Jaramogi Odinga, and Kenyatta, and then all the way, we went all the way to Moi, and the likes of Saitoti, and the likes of Karanja, and we came all the way. So all this time, anybody that has been a deputy, I've always had a problem. And so this is not new, and I will not want to say that there is a problem between the president and the deputy. Okay. Probably what we are seeing is the politics of Mount Kenya, where it is becoming so slippery on the deputy president to the levels where now he wants to reach out to the brothers that he felt were not his brothers. And probably so it's not a relationship problem at this point between the president and the deputy.
But probably looking at the dailies, we could be misled to feel that probably it's a big problem. It could just be an individual trying to seek his own political salvation.
Let us not trivialize what is happening. I mean, the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, you know, for some of us who were planning Limuru 3, and I'm happy we planned it and we went and we executed and we spoke on that podium. And when he gets intelligence. And the whole mountain right now realizes they made a mistake on the 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. And we shall not relent. The first thing I usually say about that thing is that the ASAL counties, please, we are not saying that what you have be taken away from you. No. We are saying from where what you have, that came, that the people who have got more, who have got bigger populations must start getting money that shows a relationship between the money and the people, because this money comes from people. Kiambu, for example, has got, as the last census, had 2.4 million people. Obviously, when you're collecting taxes from 2.4 million people, you will get more money than if you're collecting taxes from 130,000 people. But when it comes to distribution, you find some of these counties are getting more money than what the other counties that have been, then if we cannot have 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, 1 shilling, then let's start collecting taxes per kilometer. We say that every kilometer of this country must give us this amount of taxes. So that those people who are saying that we are allocating money to arid lands and all those spaces, then those spaces must also give us equal taxes. So we cannot have a situation whereby a population gives a very huge amount of money in terms of what is collected nationally, but they get very little. So that some places when children are looking for bursary, they get more money than others. That is not acceptable to the people of Mount Kenya. And I'm glad that Natembeya has picked it up. I can tell you in Western now it's a wave. They also want 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling.
But Gachagua had opposed it initially. This change of heart.
You see, Gachagua made a mistake. And people make mistakes. And he has apologized publicly. He has apologized to Mama Ngina. He's apologized to Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. He's apologized to Mount Kenya publicly. He has owned up to his mistakes. And he knows that by fighting BBI, that was a big mistake. By fighting 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling, that was a big mistake. You are saying there are no differences between the deputy president and the president? They are there. They are huge. When you get to a place where I saw Raila Amolo Odinga being the person escorting Museveni at the airport and the deputy president is not there and he missed several state functions. Of course, the president is, where is my deputy? It's not like he's not concerned, and I can tell you for sure, whether you downplay it or not, even when President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and William Ruto had differences, people started downplaying and saying there are no differences, there are no problems. We know it is deeper than you see. It is there, it is denial, but whether you deny it or not, I can tell you one thing for free. Mount Kenya is not going to vote with UDA in 2027. Anybody who
But is it necessarily united? That's the other question.
You see, I can tell you, the few leaders in Mount Kenya are not united. But the people, we called for Limuru 3, and we were sending messages and telling people, please sponsor yourself. Because and when I hear people saying Limuru 3 was financed because I sat in that committee, I worry deeply. Because we had planned a dome. We only wanted delegates. We wanted 2,500, by the way. And our dome was for only 3,000 people. We got in excess of 7,000 people coming there. And the messages they got were very clear. Sponsor yourself. Because nobody was given transport allowance. I can tell you for free. Nobody was given lunch, nothing. In fact, it is a well-wisher in the morning who said they can provide tea for people. And people who came very early in the morning, they found tea, a piece of bread, and a banana. So when you find 7,000 people coming to a meeting where only 2,000 were invited, and they are not being paid, mtu anakuja na probox yake, pikipiki yake, and so on and so forth, and they were all speaking, and you should have felt the mood in that place. Okay. So the mountain is speaking in one voice. Forget these leaders who are looking at their own stomachs, because I can tell you, and I can assure you, in Parliament you will see a very different voting for the finance bill. And I know we shall get to that, because MPs are being told back at home, and you saw one of them who is a lawyer in Muranga. He was told, go and vote for that finance bill that is increasing taxes on avocado. When you come back here, we are not going to see your face. Okay. And so those MPs are saying, wait, this is what UDA wants. Mm-hmm. But back at home, every other person is united against this finance bill. Mm-hmm. So you will see a very interesting vote in June for this finance bill, because MPs from Mount Kenya have been told categorically, we as the people are united. Do not pass this finance bill.
Because of time, what is your assessment of what the president is reading from local newspapers this morning in the
I think, to start with, one, my prediction is that, ever since the exit of Uhuru Kenyatta, there is a clear vacuum within the mountain in terms of national leadership. And the reason is, even Rigathi himself, he was a first-term MP. Then he comes from first-term MP to becoming the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. So there is genuine friction between those more seasoned politicians than themselves, because somebody probably has been in the political scene longer than him. And they feel like, why would this guy be just one cough away from the presidency? Whereas some of us, that has been our ambitions in life. So that's the first frustration the DP is facing. So his options include, one, what strategy do I employ to mobilize the mountain and rally them in one direction? So you pick the low-hanging fruit that was abandoned last election, the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. And the reason why that's easier, because the language of the mountain is mostly affiliated to issues to do with finances and the economy of the area. So if you show them that I am actually rooting out for your interest, it's just a mobilization strategy. I don't think there is very genuine intention with this 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote.
Inviting the retired president into this debate, at what cost? His relationship with his boss?
You see, and that's why Limuru 3 was supposed to be a significant event. But I didn't think it rose to the levels that was anticipated. Because Uhuru was a product of Limuru. You remember? Because the Kikuyus met and they said, if anybody wants to speak to us, come through this gentleman. So the anticipation with Limuru 3, and that's why there were mamas around, that Rigiji could have played a role in the Limuru 3. But in the absence of that, it's also something to observe that he is on record saying that he wants to reach out to Uhuru immediately after Limuru 3 endorses Uhuru. So I think what he's also looking for is an endorsement of some sort, just in case he decides to run in 2027. And don't be shocked. The way he's behaving, the way he's conducting himself, I honestly feel that he wants to be on the ballot by 2027. And I think the unsettling is being born out of what Mheshimiwa has pointed out. There is a wave that is shaping up from the ground of younger politicians who are also demanding their space on the table. Ndindi Nyoro has been crisscrossing the country, preaching the gospel of Ndindi Nyoro and trying to persuade people that he's competent enough. And he's given himself also as an option for replacement of Rigiji. So Rigiji sees all these realities. What are you supposed to do? Is go back and try to also mobilize so that if you're able to consolidate the mountain block, you will still be relevant to President Ruto. Okay. But in the absence of that, then you risk being thrown out into political oblivion. But allow me to say one thing as I conclude. I honestly feel, as a country, let's not go that direction of the Limurus, especially for my generation, because what we are doing to this country is really, really unfair. Because if we think like that, what if those of us who come from Western also go and say, we want to do a Western one, and ask ourselves, compared to what the guys from the mountain have gotten in terms of resource distribution in this country, and compared to the fact that some of us even come from the bread basket of this country, are we supposed to also ask ourselves those questions? Okay. But if we want to level the playing ground, let's not think as Kikuyu, Luyas, Luos, Kalenjins, and whatnot.
I'll give you each about a minute for your parting shot, starting with Banalote. Just your parting shot.
What my party showed is important that people meet. It's important that we think about ourselves individually and our positions in future, but it's more critically important for us to think about this country as a whole. The moment we start balkanizing this country, like Mr. Buluma is saying, we are destroying this country. So if the deputy president is sponsoring Limuru Free, directly or indirectly, for the purposes of his own survival, he is killing the future of this country, because soon we are going to see every community balkanizing. And for the last and the record from myself, the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote is going to destroy this country. This country is supposed to be developed as a unit, not as sections. And so we need to develop this country entirely. So that if we say that we're collecting taxes, so the taxes should go to where we're collecting these taxes from, then let us not even look at Turkana where we're getting oil. Let us not look at Kwale where we're getting titanium. Let us not look at any other place where we've got natural resources that has been given to us by God, because most of these natural resources are found outside the areas where the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote is proposed. Let us build this country so that we can start harnessing resources given to us by God from the entire country. Because if we start doing that, then the country will develop like we've developed Dubai, using oil that is coming from the desert and developing the city that is quite away. Okay. So let us not look at the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote as a panacea for this country. It is actually going to kill this country, and the reason why it was not put in the constitution when we were doing the constitution before.
Thank you so much, Panalute. Fanyamambo, parting shot?
My parting shot is very easy. Mount Kenya and our people are not going to relent on the 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling, whatever anybody says. Because from where we sit, we cannot have a situation where our children are queuing in Roiro here to get bursaries of 800 shillings, and there are children who are getting bursaries of up to 20, 30,000 shillings. That is not equality. So for us and from where we sit, 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling is a deal breaker. Okay. Anybody who wants to have a conversation with any vote that will come from Mount Kenya, and I can tell you for free, if you want to have any conversation about getting even 1 vote for an MCA in Mount Kenya, 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling is
the bare minimum.
It is the bare minimum.
Okay.
We shall ask for more, but without that one, don't even engage us in any conversation within Mount Kenya. And the DP has made it very clear on behalf of Mount Kenya, and every other person you listen to will tell you, don't come within our confines to talk to us about anything until we discuss about 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling.
Final word, Bwana Buluma. 30 seconds.
Albert Einstein observed that the significant problems we face can never be solved with the same thinking that caused that problem. It is the thinking of balkanizing Kenyans that has denied Kenya the potential that this country represents. I want to dare say, fanya mambo and persuade you. Even as you think as a Kikuyu, think first as a Kenyan, and then adopt your Kikuyu strategy. Because, remember, Fanyamambo, we are coming from a history where, at some point in this country, people decided to even isolate 2 tribes. Because the other communities were feeling like you're personalizing the conversation. I will persuade even the Mount Kenya leadership not to be at the forefront promoting balkanization of the country. I would rather we adopt a Kenyan thinking that is beneficial for all of us, because they have been talking about taxes. Everybody pays tax in this country, irrespective of where you come from, and it's a unifying factor. They have talked about distribution of resources. Everybody is entitled. And let me tell you, every time you walk out of this country, you don't walk out and people ask you, which tribe are you from? Okay. They want to know you as a Kenyan. I persuade our people from the mountain, please adopt a Kenyan thinking. It will solve our problem.
Anthony Buluma, CEO, Kenya Youth Parliamentarians Association, Titus Lote, MP, Kachiliba constituency, and Ben Kinothia, a lawyer, also known as Fanyamambo. Fanyamambo
Ben Nilitupa.
Fanyamambo Kinothia, a lawyer. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being part of this conversation this morning. To our editorial comment now. Now, recent data released by the Kenya Universities and Colleges Central Placement Service, CUPS, reveals a troubling trend. Only 258,000 out of the 890,000 students eligible for tertiary education have been placed. This is a significant gap in our education system, with over 70% of students failing to transition beyond secondary school. This scenario demands urgent and thorough review, as it poses serious implications for the future of Kenya. Well, admittedly, some students might proceed directly to private universities or even study abroad. The absence of a centralized tracking system leaves a vast majority unaccounted for. This lack of data prevents us from understanding the true extent of the problem and addressing the underlying causes effectively. It is clearly abnormal when a huge fraction of the country's students are missing out on higher education, and points to deeper systemic issues, including wastage. Despite having sufficient capacities in public and private universities, many students are left out. For instance, out of the available 1,078,000 slots, only a fraction has been utilized, leaving a considerable number of slots vacant. Now, this gap suggests several potential issues, ranging from economic barriers, lack of awareness, questions over the quality and relevance of education, to even policy and administrative gaps. Yet failing to engage a significant portion of our youth in higher education has far-reaching consequences, both economic and social, with generational